Most people think Thelema is a license for chaos, a religion of excess, a philosophy built to justify doing whatever you want. And that is exactly why so many people misunderstand it before they ever get close to what it actually is. Because the most famous sentence in Thelema sounds dangerous if you hear it with ordinary ears. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. At first, it sounds like rebellion without limits. But to those who entered its deeper current, it meant almost the opposite. Not permission to become more scattered, but a demand to discover the one thing you were actually born to be. And once you understand that, Thelema stops looking like a scandal and starts looking like one of the most ambitious spiritual systems of the modern world. To understand how it emerged, you have to go back to the late 19th century, when Europe was going through a strange spiritual fever. Ancient religions were being re-examined, secret societies were attracting intellectuals and mystics. Egypt was returning to the Western imagination, and ceremonial magic was being rebuilt from fragments of Hermetic texts, Kabbalah, alchemy, Rosicrucian symbolism, Christian mysticism, and newly translated Eastern teachings. This was the world that produced the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, one of the most influential occult organizations in modern history. It promised more than belief. It promised initiation, method, and transformation. And it was inside this atmosphere that Aleister Crowley first developed. Crowley did not appear out of nowhere as a complete system builder. He was formed by the currents around him. He entered the Golden Dawn, absorbed ritual magic, symbolic ascent, astral work, and the use of the Tree of Life as a map of consciousness. He studied yoga and meditation with unusual seriousness for a Western occultist of his time. He traveled, experimented, pushed boundaries, and tried to unite mystical states with magical discipline. That matters, because Thelema was not born as a random act of provocation. It came out of years of practice, conflict, initiation, and synthesis. The decisive turning point came in Cairo in 1904. Crowley and his wife Rose were in Egypt, and according to the tradition, a series of events led to the reception of a text that would change everything. Liber vel Legis, the Book of the Law. Crowley claimed the words were dictated by a preterhuman intelligence named Aiwass. To believers, this was revelation. To historians, it was the founding moment of a new religious and magical current. Either way, this is where Thelema formally begins. The book announced a new spiritual era, a new law, and a new understanding of the human being. It introduced the divine figures Nuit, Hadit, and Ra-Hoor-Khuit, and with them, a cosmology that was not merely theological, but initiatory. Nuit is infinite space, the boundless totality, the star-filled body of possibility itself. Hadit is the infinitely small point, the secret flame in the heart of every being, pure motion, pure center, pure subjectivity. Ra-Hoor-Khuit is the crowned and conquering child, the force of active manifestation, will, and the new age. These are not just gods in the conventional sense. In Thelema, they function as cosmic principles, mystical realities, and inner formulas of consciousness. This is one of the first places where Thelema touches older pagan worlds. Its imagery is deeply Egyptian, but not in the sense of simply reviving ancient temple religion exactly as it once was. It reinterprets divine forms as living symbols, magical intelligences, and initiatory keys. That is why modern pagans, ceremonial magicians, and esoteric seekers often find points of contact with it, even when they do not share all of Crowley's conclusions. And then we come to the sentence that changed everything. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. The entire misunderstanding of Thelema lives inside the gap between the words as they sound and the words as they are meant. In ordinary life, do what you want means follow impulse, appetite, preference, or mood. In Thelema, will with a capital W means something far more exacting. It is your true will, the deepest trajectory of your being, the line of force that expresses your nature in harmony with the larger order of existence. It is not ego inflation. It is not moral laziness. It is not spiritual narcissism. In fact, one of the hardest lessons in Thelema is that most of what people call my will is conditioning, fear, imitation, appetite, or confusion. That is why the second great formula matters just as much. Love is the law, love under will. Love here is not sentimental softness. It is the principle of union, relation, attraction, and coherence. Will gives direction. Love gives connection. In other words, Thelema is not chaos pretending to be spirituality. It is a claim that every being has a rightful orbit, like a star moving, according to its own nature, and that spiritual life begins when you stop living as a copy of someone else. In my view, this is the point where many people realize they never understood Thelema at all. What looked like rebellion turns out to be discipline at a much deeper level. Crowley tied this vision to his doctrine of the Aeons, another central piece of Thelema. He described spiritual history as unfolding through great symbolic ages. First came the Aeon of Isis, associated with the great mother, nature, and matriarchal religious consciousness. Then the Aeon of Osiris, centered on the dying god, sacrifice, sin, suffering, and obedience. A pattern Crowley saw reflected strongly in Christianity and older redemptive religions. Then, according to Thelema, came the Aeon of Horus, the age of the crowned and conquering child, where the spiritual task is no longer submission to an external law, but awakening to one's own divine center and accepting the responsibility that comes with it. Whether one accepts this literally, symbolically, or as mythic philosophy, the idea is powerful. Humanity, in this view, is moving from dependence to conscious participation. This is also where Thelema touches what many call the perennial philosophy. Beneath different religions, different gods, and different languages, there appears again and again the idea that the human being contains a hidden spark, that reality is layered, that the visible world is not the whole story, and that spiritual practice is a path of remembering, aligning, and awakening. You can see echoes of this in Hermeticism, in Gnosticism, in Kabbalah, in Neoplatonism, in certain forms of Tantra, in Christian mysticism, and even in the Greek roots of the word Thelema itself, which means will. Crowley did not simply repeat these traditions, but he recombined them into a new map. Kabbalah gave structure. Ritual magic gave method. Yoga gave discipline. Pagan symbolism gave multiplicity and living archetypes. Gnostic and Hermetic currents gave the idea that knowledge is transformative and that the human being is a bridge between worlds. That is why serious practitioners do not usually approach Thelema as a belief to admire from a distance. They treat it as work. Crowley defined magic as the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with will. That sounds dramatic, but at its deepest level it points to something practical. The point of ritual is not theatrical decoration. It is to align intention, body, imagination, and consciousness. The point of meditation is not escape. It is to observe the machinery of the self until a truer center begins to emerge. The point of keeping a magical diary, performing invocations, practicing banishings, studying symbols, and undergoing ordeals is to strip away internal contradiction. Experienced initiates use these methods to test themselves. They ask, am I acting from true will or from compensation? From clarity or from vanity? From alignment or from fragmentation? A practical example makes this easier to understand. Imagine someone who spent years living according to family expectation, social pressure, and fear of failure. They might be outwardly successful, but inwardly divided. In a Thelemic framework, spiritual work would not begin by telling that person to indulge every impulse. It would begin by helping them separate borrowed identities from authentic direction. Through discipline, self-study, ritual, and reflection. They might discover that what they called freedom was actually avoidance, and what they feared as sacrifice was actually the beginning of real purpose. That is one reason Thelema still speaks to modern people. It asks a brutal question. Are you living your life, or merely inhabiting a script handed to you by the world? This knowledge was not only transmitted through books, it moved through initiatory bodies. The AA, founded by Crowley and George Cecil Jones, was designed as a structured path of personal spiritual attainment, emphasizing direct work rather than social belonging. The Ordo Templi Orientis, or OTO, originally founded in a different context, later absorbed the law of Thelema and became one of its most important organizational vehicles. In these circles, secrecy was not only about hiding information from outsiders, it was about protecting the process. Certain truths mean little before experience and become obvious after it. That principle is older than modern occultism. It is found in mystery religions, initiatory priesthoods, esoteric Christianity, Sufi orders, Masonic streams, and many schools that distinguish between hearing and knowing. Over time, Thelema developed multiple interpretations. Some approached it as a religion, others as a magical system, others as a philosophy of radical spiritual individuation. Israel Regardie helped make parts of the tradition more accessible in the 20th century. Lon Milo Duquette later explained much of it in language that modern readers could actually grasp. Scholars such as Wouter Hanegraaff, Marco Passi, and Richard Kaczynski helped place Crowley and Thelema in serious historical context. And in the wider occult world, Thelema influenced everything from modern ceremonial magic to chaos magic, neo-pagan circles, left-hand path interpretations, depth psychology readings, and contemporary spirituality centered on self-realization. But none of this removes the controversy. Crowley remains one of the most polarizing figures in modern esotericism. Some of that comes from a sensational biography, some from deliberate self-mythologizing, and some from real moral complexity. The danger in Thelema has always been obvious. If someone mistakes ego for will, the whole system can become a justification for self-deception. That criticism is not trivial. It is one of the most important tests built into the tradition itself. Because the closer a path comes to freedom, the more dangerous confusion becomes. And maybe that is why Thelema continues to fascinate. It offers no comfort in blind obedience. It places the burden back on the individual soul. And that is exactly why it still matters now. We live in an age flooded with distraction, identity performance, and external programming. People are told to optimize, imitate, brand themselves, and call that authenticity. Against that background, Thelema can sound startlingly current. Not because everyone needs to join an order or accept Crowley as a prophet, but because the central challenge remains alive. Discover what is essential in you, align with it, and stop wasting your life in fragments. For me, that is where Thelema becomes more than an occult curiosity. It becomes a mirror. And when I first understood that, it stopped feeling like a strange doctrine from the margins and started feeling like a dangerous kind of honesty. So maybe the real question is not whether Thelema is shocking. Maybe the real question is whether most people are willing to face what it demands. Because do what thou wilt sounds easy only to those who have never tried to separate their deepest nature from everything false layered on top of it. If you have made it this far, tell me in the comments, do you think Thelema is ultimately a path of freedom, discipline, or both? And if this video helped you see the subject in a completely different light, leave a like so the channel can keep bringing these deeper teachings into clear language. In the end, Thelema began with a phrase that seemed to promise absolute permission. But after the history, the symbols, the practices, and the initiatory context, we arrive somewhere very different from where we started. Not permission, but alignment. Not indulgence, but discovery. Not chaos, but orbit. Thelema says every man and every woman is a star. And a star is not free because it drifts without direction. A star is free because it burns according to its nature. If that idea speaks to you, subscribe. Share this video with someone who thinks occultism is just confusion or superstition. And keep going deeper with the playlist on screen now, because some of the symbols behind this tradition only fully open when you connect them to the other hidden teachings surrounding it.